Welcome folks, and in today's lesson we're going to talk about a topic. Maybe you can just have a quick think about what we're going to focus on today. This magical thing which is in the night sky. Every night it's there. You may not see it sometimes, and you may see it in different sizes, different shapes, but it's always there. And sometimes when you look up, it's at its what appears to be its most luminous, and even then it's tricking us. It's not emitting any light, and in the past it has been associated with many things. People have even used the Latin word for moon, luna, to talk about certain people that they deem to be lunatics doing crazy things at certain times of year when the moon was at its fullest. And so what is a moon? Well, objects that revolve around planets are called satellites, and maybe we should even say revolve around any bigger object. And there are some natural moons. It was a Italian genius called Galileo Galilei, who first hypothesized the presence of moons around other planets, Jupiter. Up until then, of course, we thought that we were super special and the only planet that had a moon. And of course, Galileo was seen in some quarters as a lunatic also, ironically enough. There is also artificial satellites, weather communications satellites, our wonderful world of our intermesh network of GPS satellites. I think there's 31 in operation right now, orbiting the Earth. That allow us to search everything from the closest fried chicken restaurant to tracking the foot patterns of cheetahs as they migrate to different parts of the world. So the leading theory of the moon's origin is that a Mars-sized body collided with Earth about 4.5 billion years ago. Now, this is according to NASA. One of the interesting things is that we don't actually know how the moon formed and how it got stuck in the orbit around the Earth. One of the theories hypothesized is that this smashing into Earth caused fragments to move out from Earth and then coalesce and form the moon. Now that's challenged by a lot of people who say that it might have should have knocked the Earth out of its orbit around the sun, but that's the leading theory right now. There is a lot of things that crash into the moon. They cause these different craters on the moon, and we'll talk about why. There's some wonderful names for all these different parts of the moon. The Sea of Rains, the Sea of Serenity, sounds like a great place to visit if you ask me. Sea of Clouds, and the Sea of Tranquility. Sea of Tranquility is especially interesting because it's the site where the Apollo landings happened, and the first people to walk on the moon. They took one giant step for mankind in 1969. And we haven't been there as much lately, but we still do go there and send probes there every now and again. So it takes almost a month for the moon to orbit the Earth. Now we should say that orbit, that revolution of the moon around the Earth is at a slight tilt. That's really important because it allows us to see a full moon, that full moon we talked about earlier. If it wasn't on the tilt, then the rays from the sun would be blocked by the Earth. And it also takes the moon about the same length of time to rotate on its axis. So that's significant. If we look at the GIF as the moon makes its way around the Earth, we see that it's spinning on its own axis also. And what does this mean, the fact that it takes the same length for the rotation and the revolution? Well, what it basically means is that we have a dark side of the moon, and we have a big chunk of the moon that we don't see, and we didn't see until satellites went up there and showed us the back of the moon, if you like, the dark side of the moon, and then we realized that there was more to the moon than met the eye. So the moon we talked about earlier, I talked about the fact that the moon is non-luminous. It doesn't produce its own light. It may appear to, and that's another thing that's beguiling about the moon. The more you understand, the less you know. It actually is really a giant reflector, a giant mirror, which reflects the sun's lights and bounces that down to the Earth. And this is why we see different shapes in the moon, because depending on where the moon is at, we will see a different shape in the night sky. We also talked about the fact that there's no atmosphere, water, wind, or erosion. The impacts of that are that lots of things impact on the moon. Comets, asteroids, meteors, and so on crash and smash into the moon. The moon isn't protected with its atmosphere like the Earth is. So let's talk some distances. The moon is relatively close to Earth. In relative terms, it is close to the Earth, 384,000 kilometers away. And the universe is so much bigger than that. And the nearest planet is much, much bigger than that distance-wise. However, if you compare that to a commercial plane flying over Earth, which flies at about 12,000 kilometers, then it is quite a distance. It's the furthest planet, or the furthest place in the universe, rather, that humans have been. So it's still that frontier, if you like. The diameter of Earth is approximately 13,000 kilometers. The diameter of the moon is about 3,500 kilometers, so about 1/4 of the distance. Now, if you were to compare it in terms of volume, you'd be able to stuff about 50, that's 50 moons into the Earth if the Earth was hollow. And the temperature, this is something that sometimes we think about if we ever had to relocate to the moon for a bit of a prolonged vacation, because we've taken all the resources out of the Earth. The temperature on the moon varies wildly, minus 170 to 100 degrees Celsius, dependent on whether it's facing the sun or not. So you can see there's a huge variation there. Now, we should also talk about the 8 phases of the moon. What are these things that we see? If we begin at the new moon and we move our way across the bottom to the right, we see that the moon that we see is getting bigger. We see more of the moon. And in that phase where it's getting bigger, that's known as the waxing phase. So you'll see the term waxing. And the shape is given by 2 words, well 3 actually I guess, crescent shape, a half moon, and then the fatter shape is the gibbous shape. So we move from waxing crescent, half moon to waxing gibbous. And then we get to that full moon that so many tales have been concocted about. And then on the way out, as the moon is getting smaller, we use the term waning. To wane means to get smaller, to recede. And so it's starting to get smaller. So we go from waning gibbous, last quarter half moon, to waning crescent. And this is just a diagram of how that appears in terms of where it would be in relation to the Earth and the Sun. So you can stop the video if you want to have a look at that in greater detail. And again, you can pause the video here just to have a look at the different elements and the different phases, these 8 phases of the moon. So no doubt we know a lot about the moon. We've even been there. We've even taken some scientific experiments there. We've done some scientific experiments. We've taken some samples. We've even unceremoniously planted an American flag on there. But then there is a lot that we don't know. Fast forwarding to 2008, the Chandrayaan mission, which was an Indian mission, was the first to really collect good data, which would support the notion that there was water on the moon. And that's significant because the fate of organisms living is very closely tied into the presence of water. So it's hypothesized that there may have been water there at one time, and there may have been life there at one time, and maybe life there in the future. The Laddie spacecraft on the bottom right, a NASA probe was sent up there to collect pieces of evidence on the atmosphere. So it collected particles, dust particles, and analysed those. So we're continuing to look at the moon. We're continuing to learn about the moon, and we're continuing to ask questions on the moon. And I think this is really important because it is the closest main structure to us, the closest body to us, and a place that we've been and that we will be more in the future, I think. So it's important to ask questions as you look up into the night sky and you see this pattern as we move from full moon to a waning gibbous to half moon, right the way to waning crescent. So I would encourage you folks to look up into the night sky and continue to ask those questions. And if you like this video, please just give us a wee thumbs up